Haley had always believed that her daughter, Susie, was well cared for at her Grandma June's house. However, when Susie suddenly became mute, Haley sensed a serious issue. She hoped for a strong relationship between her daughter and her grandmother, imagining June's home as a welcoming place filled with fresh-baked treats, stuffed animals, and warm milk. Yet, she was about to discover a troubling reality. For many months, visits to Grandma June's had been the highlight for both Haley and her 6-year-old daughter, Susie. These visits were filled with affection and joy, making them eagerly anticipated. But unexpectedly, Susie's demeanor changed drastically after visiting her grandmother. Once cheerful and outgoing, she turned silent and aloof, no longer smiling or laughing after returning from June's. She appeared genuinely frightened at the mention of going to Grandma June's or when told that her grandmother would visit or look after her while Haley was at work. Haley was puzzled by this change. Was it just a phase? Or was something untoward happening at June's house? She couldn't pinpoint when exactly Susie's behavior had shifted, only recalling a particular Saturday morning when Susie expressed reluctance to visit her grandmother. Despite Susie's protests, Haley took her to June's a few days later, only to observe her daughter's unsettling quietness. Realizing something was amiss, Haley knew she needed to uncover the truth urgently. She found herself torn between her desire to be the perfect mother for Susie and the ideal daughter to June. Haley found herself in a difficult predicament. What had initially been a source of joy and affection had unexpectedly turned into a source of stress. She was torn. She wanted her daughter to enjoy the benefits of having a grandmother, but she also recognized that Susie often felt overwhelmed during their visits to Grandma June's house. To manage this, Haley decided to cut back on their frequent visits, which confused her mother, who noticed their weekly visits were dwindling. Haley felt unable to explain the real reason to her mother, fearing it would break her heart. She also observed a change in Susie's mood. The girl seemed happier, though she still looked sad whenever the topic of visiting Grandma June came up. Haley was puzzled by these changes and wished for more time to understand them. However, her plans were interrupted by an unexpected call from her boss, who needed her to travel out of town for a business meeting over the weekend. This meant Haley would be away for a couple of days and needed someone to look after Susie. With a heavy heart, knowing the potential for upset it could cause, Haley informed Susie that she would need to stay with Grandma June for the weekend. "But Mommy," Susie whimpered, her lip quivering and eyes beginning to tear up. "You said we'd only go there if it was absolutely necessary. I don't want to. Please." Haley turned away to hide her own tears before responding, "I really need to, honey," causing Susie to burst into tears. Susie did not resist or try to change her mother's mind. She seemed to have resigned herself to her fate, a sight that was even more distressing. With a bowed head, she made her way to her room to sleep. The next day, Haley prepared everything and drove her daughter to Grandma June's house. The elderly lady was overjoyed to reunite with her daughter and granddaughter. She embraced Haley warmly, although her smile faltered slightly when she hugged Susie, as if she perceived that something was amiss. However, she quickly concealed her surprise and lovingly hugged the 6-year-old. Unbeknownst to Haley, she was making a grave error. After leaving Susie with Grandma June, Haley departed for her business trip. That night, alone in her hotel room, She couldn't shake the feeling that she had erred in allowing her mother to take care of Susie. Although June was happy to look after her granddaughter and they had always been close, Susie had shown a reluctance to even speak of her grandmother, much less stay with her. The truth, however, was soon to be revealed. As Haley pondered these thoughts, her phone unexpectedly began to ring, catching her off guard. When she noticed the caller ID was her mom, Haley greeted her with a surprised hi. As it was unusual for June to call instead of texting, Grandma June's voice was full of concern as she described something peculiar about Susie's behavior. "She's been really odd since she arrived. I can't figure out what's wrong," she said anxiously. Hanging up, Haley felt even more anxious than before and found herself unable to sleep that night. Trying to make sense of the situation, she was haunted by the image of Susie's tears when she told her about spending the weekend at her grandma's, the girl appearing utterly devastated by the news. Feeling helpless and unsure of what else to do, Haley contacted her boss the next morning. She explained that a family emergency had arisen at home, hoping it would be acceptable to leave, given that she had only spent one day on the business trip. Her boss, familiar with Susie and sympathetic to her situation, consented immediately, urging her to keep him updated and wishing her well. Haley jumped into her car and drove swiftly to her mom's house, arriving a day earlier than planned. Her mind raced with thoughts as she accelerated along the highway, desperate to understand what had altered during the previous visits to Grandma June's and how she could resolve the issue. Arriving in record time, Haley entered her mom's house apprehensive and uncertain, her expression one of worry as she tried to prepare herself for what she might find inside. Susie was sitting on the floor in a corner of the living room, her expression empty and her face shaped into a sorrowful frown. She did not welcome her mom as she normally would when Haley arrived home. Dropping her jacket, Haley quickly knelt down next to her. "What's wrong, baby?" she asked, making eye contact with her daughter. Haley attempted to embrace her, but Susie seemed mentally detached, her gaze piercing through Haley as if focused on something invisible beyond her mother's comprehension. However, the situation deteriorated further when, just as Haley thought it couldn't worsen, Susie pulled her knees to her chest, hugged her legs, and began to rock gently, tears brimming on her lower eyelashes. "Susie," Haley called out, and the girl seemed to come to, finally acknowledging her mother. "What's wrong?" Haley asked, her voice filled with concern. "You're back," Susie murmured, still rocking. Haley had to firmly hold her to make her stop. "Let's go home," the mother suggested. And after a moment's hesitation, Susie stood and walked straight to the front door. She didn't take time to gather her belongings or bid farewell to her grandmother. She was set on leaving immediately, which sent Haley's thoughts racing. Could June have done something to traumatize Susie, causing her to behave this way? During the drive home, Susie remained silent, withdrawn, and pensive. There was more to it. A palpable sense of dread seemed to emanate from her, heightening Haley's anxiety. Once they arrived at their apartment, Haley began to probe with questions, eager to understand what was troubling her daughter. Susie remained silent, her tightly pursed lips and tear-filled eyes conveying the story her words couldn't. "It's okay, sweetheart," Haley soothed as she embraced her daughter. Before her business trip, Haley had covertly installed surveillance cameras throughout her mother's home. From the kitchen and living room to the bedroom where Susie often slept. Sitting behind her daughter, Haley powered up her laptop to access the footage. Uncertain of what she might discover. What could her mother have done to leave Susie so frightened and traumatized? The cameras would soon tell. For 2 hours. The footage showed nothing out of the ordinary. Grandma June went about her chores, prepared dinner, and attempted to engage with a still distraught Susie. Just as Haley was about to lose hope, something caught her eye. At first, she thought she was seeing things. But a quick rewind of the footage confirmed it wasn't her imagination. Her heart skipped a beat as she caught a glimpse of a rapidly moving shadow in the background near where Susie was sitting. What was that? She murmured to herself, rewinding the footage once more and playing it back in slow motion. Her breath hitched when she identified it as the silhouette of a man. Filled with dread, she observed that at the time captured in the video, Grandma June was nowhere to be seen. And although Susie appeared calm at first, the presence of the mysterious figure was alarming. As soon as the shadow shifted behind her, she stiffened. Her eyes widened in fear, and she began to tremble. Cautiously, her gaze shifted to the side and she started shaking her head. Terror clearly evident in her small frame. Haley was quick to grab her phone and call her mother. "Mom," she urgently inquired as soon as June answered. "Is there someone staying with you or visiting right now?" Grandma June sounded genuinely puzzled by the question. "No." "Why do you ask? Are you expecting me to have guests?" Haley didn't reveal what she had just witnessed on the camera. It suddenly occurred to her that if her mom was unaware of the person in her home, she could be at risk too. "Can you come to my place right now?" Haley asked, trying to keep her voice calm so as not to alarm her mother. The fearsome image of the shadowy figure was etched in her memory, making her feel uneasy. "I'm quite tied up right now, dear," Grandma June replied. "It's urgent." "Mom," Haley pressed, her voice tinged with panic. Realizing her daughter had been distressed for weeks suggested that the intruder had been making regular appearances at June's residence. Whether June was aware or not, she was possibly in danger. June agreed to leave, and once she was safely out, Haley called the authorities, forwarded them the footage, and briefed them thoroughly. The authorities reacted promptly. By the time Grandma June arrived at Haley's, a team was already searching her house. What they would discover would stir shockwaves throughout the town. When Grandma June reached Haley's home, she encountered a visibly upset Haley trying to soothe her daughter. Haley was overwhelmed with feelings of having let Susie down repeatedly. As Grandma June began to comfort her, she quickly found herself equally troubled when she discovered that a man had been secretly visiting her home in her absence. With tears streaming down her face, she hastily checked Susie, patting her down while panicking. "Oh God. No. Did they ever hurt you?" Susie denied being hurt, but her fear intensified now that her mom and grandma were aware of the situation. She worried aloud. "He's going to come after you too. He said he'd hurt you if I told anyone." As her tears flowed freely. "No. No. No." Haley reassured her, kneeling to be at eye level. "He won't be able to reach us or you. I promise." Grandma June, tearful yet firm, nodded in agreement. It was at that moment that they received a call from the authorities revealing alarming news. It turned out that a squatter had made a makeshift home in Grandma June's attic, complete with stolen supplies and items that June recognized as her own. The squatter, a man with warrants in multiple states who had recently escaped from custody, was discovered asleep among these belongings. As the police escorted him away, they expressed their gratitude to Haley and her family. With the intruder gone, Susie's visits to her grandmother's house could hopefully return to being the joyful and loving experiences they once were. After watching the story above, do you have any thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. If you enjoyed our video, please like, subscribe, and share our channel. That's all about today's stories. See you next time.